Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know it's been a while since we've seen you all. Hopefully, you were at our virtual summit, and that was the last chance we got to see you. Today, we've got an awesome session. Chris has done us a big favor showing up. I know you're here to hear from him, but we'll run through some quick housekeeping first. So first off, like always, this Zoom is being recorded. So that way we can have it, we can post it up on our site. If you missed any of our other webinars throughout the year, or want to go back even a couple years, they're all on our site, they're on our YouTube page. Please feel free to check them out. Let us know what you think of the site, right? We redid that in May this year, and we really would appreciate your input. And if you have any questions that come up, and please ask questions. Chris is really easy to talk to, super knowledgeable. So if you have any questions throughout today's session, please put them in the Q&A section or in the chat. We will try our best to get back to you and answer every single question that we can throughout the hour that we have with you today. And once this closes, we do have the post-event survey, so please don't forget. 4 lucky participants will be able to win a $25 Amazon gift card with the holidays right around the corner. You know, that always helps. You can find anything and everything on there. I know I do most of my holiday shopping on Amazon. So definitely, please let us know what you think of today's survey. It helps us build for 2024 and gives us some great feedback that we can just keep building upon. And upcoming at the end of the month, we know everyone loves prizes, right? That cash always helps. We are doing a end of year member appreciation event. So check out on your emails, communications will be coming soon. There will be little spinners, many of opportunities to win prizes. If you stay through the end, do all of the activities, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a very cool special prize, which will be announced. So stay tuned on your emails for that. And without further ado, please meet Chris. Chris, you can take on over and introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get my deck up here. All right. You see okay, Jack?
Yep, I see it well.
Great. So thanks for the introduction, Jack. So happy to be here to the Dell user community. It's the first time I presented at one of these events. I'm based in Boston. I'm a sales engineer for the Dell Client Solutions Group, so focus on all things Dell Client, specialty products, Dell Technology, Thin Clients, certainly a big part of it. I actually met Jack at the Boston VMware user group in Boston over the summer, so always been a big fan of user groups. Citrix user group, VMware user group, been involved in these for a long time, so really happy to be at a Dell Technologies user group. So just by way of quick introduction, I'm a sales engineer at Dell. I've been here for about 7 years. Came from Wise Technology. For those that don't know, Dell Technologies bought Wise Technology in 2012. So really rolled the whole Wise portfolio into the Dell client portfolio. Prior to that, I was a Citrix partner reseller for about 7 years. So doing Citrix installations, Microsoft installations. So all told, kind of been in the EUC space for about 20 years, doing thin clients, VDI, starting back in '99, doing WinFrame, really started there, MetaFrame, and the rest of the ecosystem there. So really excited to be here. So as we'll talk about, really this session's focus on the Dell Thin Clients. Certainly Dell's got a big portfolio with VDI in general, Thin Clients infrastructure. I was talking to Jack earlier, maybe do a session in the future on infrastructure. Sound like we'll probably do that next year, talk about all the solutions Dell has in the VDI space around that. Today, we're gonna focus on the endpoint, so the Dell Thin Clients. And for those that are familiar with Wise Technology, the Thin Clients, the Wise brand was around for 30 years. So Dell's been at this a long time, rolls all the Thin Clients into the portfolio. So you hear a lot about infrastructure when we talk about VDI, talk about all the server infrastructure, storage, hyperconverged, now all the cloud infrastructure. So really a big focus on the backend technology is always important, right? We need all that stuff to power the VDI workloads, no doubt about that. We also need to focus on the client endpoint. So sometimes it's an afterthought. We put all the money into the data center. Then we think, geez, we'll just reuse an old PC, cheap PC, and we're good to go. Don't really think about the client experience very much, maybe forget about some of the requirements that might be required on the endpoint. So really the VDI endpoint's a critical piece. And over the years, I think this has become more critical as requirements for VDI have grown, right? So not just infrastructure requirements, but client requirements. So unified communication is probably the biggest one that we're all familiar with now because of COVID. The client endpoints really need to do a lot more work. And so we're going to kind of talk about really 3 things. We're going to talk about the Dell Thin Client hardware, kind of high level on that. We're going to talk about the thin client software, so a really key piece of the thin client hardware is the easy part. Then we're going to talk about what lives on the thin client, so the different operating systems. We're going to talk about systems management. That's really a function of our Dell Wise Management Suite. So that's our thin client management tool. And those are kind of the topics we're going to cover. So we'll dive right in. My only slide, Thin Client 101. We're all here. We know what traditional PCs are. It's probably a mixed audience. I'm guessing a lot of folks are familiar with Thin Client. The goal, obviously, everything's running in the data center. Could be cloud, all centrally managed, right? So that's where everything's running. When we talk thin client in this context, we're talking a small thin client OS, a firmware operating system living on the endpoint. And really the only other piece of that is my VDI clients, right? My Citrix, my VMware, my AVD, whatever I'm connecting to. So that's really what we're focused on today, is that thin client endpoint. So important point is, we're always trying to innovate and improve the user experience. So we'll talk a lot about that. You hear a lot about end user experience these days, and really ensuring you've got a good experience on that endpoint. Again, we talk a lot about the infrastructure, but that endpoint, monitoring the endpoint experience is a huge piece. So we want to make sure we delight the end user. We want the great experience, and then also make it simple for IT, right? So that's where the systems management comes into play. We're spending all the heavy lifting and infrastructure and management in the data center. We don't want to spend a ton of time on the thin client endpoint. The idea is easy, right? That's the promise. It's a dumb terminal, right? We call that, years ago. So the systems management around that, we'll spend time on that. That's a really key piece, and we'll focus on that. So delighting the end user. I'd say there's really three things we kind of focus on here. End user requirements or needs. Again, prior to Wise, I did a lot of infrastructure, Citrix deployments, and there was a lot of work done on that back end piece, but the client requirements, sometimes you forgot about, oh, geez, they need to print. Didn't think about that. USB peripherals, maybe it's in healthcare, they need Imprivata. So really understand what the user needs are and match up to what the client device. And I always say it's kind of paint by numbers, tell me what the requirements are, then we'll kind of match you with the right hardware and the right operating system to make sure you have the right client device for your VDI environment. Collaboration, this is a big one. We really didn't talk about this 5 years ago. Collaboration was didn't really do much of that within VDI. It was always kind of, geez, if we do that, performance is going to be terrible. There wasn't a lot of collaboration tools back then anyways. So it just wasn't something that we did a lot of work around. Certainly now it's a key piece of any VDI discussion is, hey, make sure we can deliver that rich user experience to the user. It's critical. Efficiency and productivity, this is all around centrally managing it, make it easy to deploy, and we'll touch a little bit about that. So these are kind of the tenets we want to talk about to ensure we have an optimal user experience. So the Dell Thin Client portfolio has evolved. So as I mentioned, Dell bought Wise back in 2012. Wise had been in the business 30 years. Our operating systems have evolved over the year. And really the focus a lot now is on a software-defined strategy. So Dell's got client hardware. They've had it for years. We really leverage a lot of the existing Dell hardware. So that's the hardware story. We're really solid with that on the Dell existing hardware side. And we talk a lot about software. So the name of the game here, a couple of key things: improve performance. We always obviously want the best performance in anything. So we're really focused on ensuring we have optimal hardware to ensure we have that performance. Simplicity and consistency, always trying to optimize the management framework and ensure we have simple management any way we can. Flexibility and choice. This is a big one for Dell. We've got the luxury of having 60, 70 different client hardware platforms to choose from and configurations. So we've got a lot of flexibility in what hardware we can deploy. So if I was to summarize one slide at kind of what the portfolio looks like, you hear the term cloud client workspace, really our thin client portfolio, VDI portfolio that focuses on client. So at the top, we'll dig into the Wise Management Suite, a key piece there. A big feature of this, it can be offered as a Dell hosted SaaS-based thin client management tool, cloud solution, or we can run it on-prem. Certainly that's an option as well, running it on-prem, but really a big story is the ability to run that from the cloud. It was important before COVID, and during COVID, it was critical that you could enable users at home and still manage them without having to set up some sort of infrastructure internally, DMZs, and all the stuff to try to manage that remote user. We could do that from the cloud. So a really big piece to enable remote users is a big one. We'll talk about the operating system. So in the middle there, Dell Thin OS, kind of the flagship OS. Wise had that, really just hit its 20-year anniversary, actually. So did a lot of work in that and continuing to innovate in that, make it easier to manage rapid adoption of partner components, really being able to keep up faster than we had in the past with our partner components, Citrix, VMware, so on, to be able to add those to the OS as soon as we can. Dell Hybrid Client, this is our newest offering. This is based on Ubuntu Linux. We'll talk about this. As you can see, it sits in between ThinOS and Windows 10 IoT. Really gives us some flexibility. I really like that lockdown, maybe non-Windows client, propensity to a Linux device, a little simpler, locked down. However, I don't want to jump all the way into Windows. So it kind of fits in the middle. And we'll talk about some of the capabilities Dell Hybrid Client brings that maybe ThinOS doesn't have. We'll kind of go up the food chain there. And then finally, Windows 10 IoT. For folks that have been doing this for a while, you might be familiar with Windows XP Embedded, or even before that, Windows NT Embedded, if you're going way back. So it's a Windows 10. I think of this as kind of a trimmed down version of Windows 10 that's based on Windows 10. And it's got some built-in security components that make it inherently a little more secure. And we'll talk about Windows Embedded a little bit, or IoT a little further on. But that's really just our Windows-based thin client we've had for a long time. So those are 3 OSs we'll kind of talk about that goes across the thin client portfolio, and we'll focus on those. And then finally at the bottom is the hardware, and we're going to touch on the hardware. As I mentioned, the devices now are really based on that Dell portfolio. So we call it leverage. So we leverage the existing OptiPlex brand, Latitude brand, Precision brand. So if you're not familiar with Dell clients, those are really the flagship Dell clients. We have the OptiPlex being kind of the standard desktop client. We've got a thin client based on that. Latitude is our laptop models. Those are, your traditional, laptop models in the enterprise. We've got thin clients based on that. And then, we've got Precision clients. Those tended to be kind of our higher end workstations. We're starting to see a little more interest in those, both laptop and towers, just because of some of the requirements we might need. Maybe it's 6, 7 monitors for a trader workstation, for example. So we really go the gamut from kind of a lower end, quote unquote, lower end device all the way up to food chain to really our high end precision if we need to, based on the requirements. So kind of the luxury of the Dell portfolio, we can really pull from a lot of different hardware options. That said, we really focus on some key thin client options that we'll kind of, talk about with customers. And then if we have other requirements, then we'll look into the broader selection of the portfolio. So we'll dive into each of these. As I mentioned, the OptiPlex 3000, that's just our traditional desktop client, as you can see. We've got a OptiPlex all-in-one. This is a 24-inch all-in-one thin client. So thin client basically baked into a monitor. So different use cases for that, different verticals find interest in that. And then we've got a couple of laptops that are purpose-built thin clients for mobile users. You can see it's based on our Latitude brand. So we've got a 3000 and a 5000. If you're not familiar with the Dell nomenclature, 3, 5, and 7000 series, kind of the different models. We've got 2 different flavors here, and we'll touch on those. And then finally at the bottom, with our Dell Hybrid client, it gets unique because it is Ubuntu Linux. We're able to install that on a lot of different hardware platforms and a lot of flexibility there. So we really can pull from our 60, 70 client portfolio if we so choose to put that software on those devices. So I'm not going to go into speeds and feeds on this stuff. If you got Q&A questions, you certainly ask. You can see some of the key specs here. I'd say the takeaway here is you'll notice the OptiPlex 3000 is based on the OptiPlex Micro thin client, or Micro PC, if you would. So, Dell's been selling these for quite a while. The slight difference you might see in the thin client option is the processors tend to be on the lower end. So for example, Celeron and Pentium in this case, quad core processors. Generally all we need. If you've got requirements, you're running more monitors, we can step up to i3, i5, different configurations, but out the gates, we kind of have our standard configurations that's where they're based on. Standard device will do 2 monitors up to 3 4K displays. Pretty standard configuration. We can do 4 or more on other platforms, which we'll touch on. But this is kind of the standard desktop single dual monitor that you see. A lot of the USB ports you might be familiar with on a traditional PC. So it's PC hardware running the thin client operating system, but the difference is it's really simplified and makes it specific to a VDI environment versus having to manage Windows out at the edge. So you can see some of the other details here on that. But any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. OptiPlex, as I mentioned, all-in-one 24-inch thin client. See this in some verticals, maybe in healthcare on a mobile cart, maybe it's a lab in a university or a school. So different use cases. Some people, we had all-in-ones in the past. We got rid of it. No one wanted them. As soon as we don't have them, everyone wants them. So we bring them back. So, some people have a preference for that. Some like the separate modular. I take the thin client, mount it on any monitor I want. But you can see here, it's based on our OptiPlex, built-in PC. So similar hardware, but running our thin client operating systems, as you can see there. So all-in-ones, certainly good for certain use cases. Again, there's always kind of this preference for them or not. But customers have asked for them. We got market verticals that are interested in them. So that's one of our key devices in the portfolio as well. So as I mentioned, Latitude, this is based on the Dell Latitude laptop. So the 3440 running our thin client operating systems, but on that Latitude hardware. So it's going to have a lot of the same creature comforts you might have on a regular Latitude. Again, the configurations may be, you're not going to be running your i7 or i9 on your, you have high-end laptop configurations. Those specs will be a little bit lower, but still, running up to an i5 if we want to on this platform. And you can see the configuration. Most of the devices will have, 8 gigs of RAM for configuration across the hardware, and the flash size will vary. 32 gigs seems to be the standard. That'll kind of go up to 64 as a standard offering shortly, just because of the nature of some of these clients get a little bit bigger, and we want to have the space for them and ensure we have adequate memory for them. So you'll see the configurations, mirror, what you might see on a Latitude, including camera, audio, and so on. It's a lot of what you'd expect to see on a traditional Dell Latitude laptop. Our 5000 series, just I'd say, a little bit more high end. The story with thin client laptops in the past was everyone on a cheap device. Well, why is came out with a cheap device? But it was a cheap device, right? So it's, we had the cost low, but you didn't get all the, the kind of nice features that you might have on a regular laptop. But on the flip side, you didn't want to pay a lot of money for it. So we had to kind of have this balance and act of, hey, we want a nice, laptop that users going to enjoy. We want to please the users, right? But we also want to make it cost competitive to compare to having to deploy a full Windows device and rolling that out. So it was always this kind of balancing act. The 5000 series gives us some additional legacy ports and configurations. Again, a little bit more premium, a great sustainability story on this platform. And it's based on our Latitude 5000 series, which is really probably the most common business laptop you see just in in the pure PC world. Folks using these, throughout the enterprise, your office users and so on. So a nice 14-inch laptop for those different use cases for the Latitude platforms. So that's the hardware. We talked about the hardware. Again, key hardware we discuss. Again, as we talked about, we'll jump into hybrid client in a moment, that we can really open that hardware portfolio up to all of our clients. So a lot of flexibility there. But those are really the key ones we focus on when it comes to our Dell Thin OS offering, a Windows 10 IoT offering. Those are 9 times out of 10 what most customers will run with: desktop model, laptop model, or all-in-one. So we'll talk about the operating systems. I think really this is, one of the most important pieces. We all can do the hardware. That's, kind of the easy part. Dell's been doing it for so long. We have that. The OS is really where the magic is, right? I always see VDI as kind of magic from the network. And I really think the offerings, the OS, the firmware that lives on the thin client is really the important part, and how we all differentiate from the competitors in the space. So Dell Thin OS, if you haven't heard of it, this has been around for 20 plus years, came from Wise. This is really what we flag as the most secure thin client OS. And really there's no magic with that. It's not open source Linux. It's not Windows 10 IoT. It's just a closed architecture. It's a closed operating system, closed API. So inherently it makes it more secure. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. Dell Hybrid Client, we'll dig into this. As I mentioned, this is our newest offering. Gives us a ton of flexibility and a non-Windows endpoint, yet doesn't require, all the Windows overhead we might have when it comes to systems management. So we'll touch on that. Windows 10 IoT, the most flexible, you can install local apps on this thing. So you've got a lot of flexibility. Again, I go back to paint by numbers, what's the use case? I've got a Windows only based VPN and it's a home user. Okay, well then they got to go Windows 10 IoT. So it was kind of figure out, generally start at Dell Thin OS. If they want a pure appliance, pure VDI, we start there and then move up the food chain as far as operating system capabilities if the requirements dictate it. With all that said, it should go without saying, you're probably aware, the device is for the most part agnostic, right? The devices will connect to all your popular leading virtual desktop application solutions. There's others we support as well, but these are probably the most common ones you see out there, but a lot of flexibility with other vendors we work with as well. But, your Citrix, your VMware, your Microsoft, your workspaces, probably the most common ones we see out there. I'm sure there's a mix in the attendees that have these different configurations. Also, that said, is third-party integration. So, the broker's one piece, but then it's all the integration you do with all the other components, right? So whether it's collaboration, and really probably the biggest thing there, innovation around UC has been the optimization of Zoom and Teams, for example, and WebEx, to be able to enjoy good experiences through my VDI, a function of a lot of those offload plugins that those vendors came out with to optimize unified communications for all the thin clients. Identity management, this has always been a big one. I'd say in Bravado, we probably see the most in healthcare, but then you've got your other traditional MFAs that you see rolled out all over the place. So support for those solutions out there as well. And then third-party monitoring, probably the newest one we've done some work in. Some of the vendors out there like Control Up a lot, all around end user experience, right? The decks, the whole story around deck. So, Citrix has built-in, director. You've got some built-in capabilities. Our management suite has some capabilities for monitoring and so on. If you want to take that to the next level, we have other third-party solutions that we work with as well. So the partner community is huge, right? We want to make sure, we're working lockstep with those vendors out there. So that's third-party integration. So back to ThinOS. Again, you can kind of see some of the key points here, but I talked a little bit about security. The fact that the OS is so small, to put it in context, the OS is about 300 megabytes. So we talk about, surface area attack, have it as small as possible. Well, inherently the OS is so small that it lends itself to that. So security is a huge profile, regardless of what vertical, everyone's concerned with security. I'd say, your healthcare customers, our finance customers, big users of ThinOS. The big security reason is why. And then they don't want to run anything else locally on it. I mean, they don't want a browser. They want to run everything through the virtual desktop, not manage anything on the device other than that virtual desktop client. So we try to keep it as simple as possible. I'd say the other big piece here is management and deployment. So literally out of the box, I can plug this thing in, have it configured with DHCP option tags or DNS records. This thing can dynamically find the management server, and the management server simply passes out the address to the connection broker, for example. So where's VMware, my security policy, my wallpaper, my printer settings, or what have you. So really quick deployment is a huge thing with ThinOS. I could deploy a call center very quickly, and there's no staging, no pre-imaging or any of this stuff that you might do on Windows, for example. So speed of deployment, management, which we'll touch on a little later, is a real big tenet of that. User interface. This is something really modernized with the Dell. So once ThinOS came into the Dell family, a lot of innovation around adding the partner components, innovation around the user interface, kind of making that a little bit more modern. So really make that interface much more attractive to really more of again, that modern interface. All the VDI environments, again, we're agnostic to what we're connected to on the back end. I'd say the biggest innovation there is, again, the rapid adoption of partner components. Some architectural changes to ThinOS allow us to do that. So it's a big innovation around the partner components there. Collaboration, we'll touch on that a little bit in a moment, but this is a huge one. In the past, when people looked at a thin client, it was, hey, it's a task-based user, not a lot of requirements. Well, as we know now with COVID and even prior to that, collaboration has been a huge piece, and we'll talk about how that's optimized with ThinOS, or all of our OSs for that matter. And then finally, purpose-built devices for ThinOS, strictly for those folks that, hey, I want the kind of simplest appliance-like model for my VDI environment. I don't want to, mess with any local applications on the device. And really that's kind of the focus on that. So again, I'll dive in a little bit about security. You can kind of see some takeaways here, but again, the point is security is the big story around this, whether it's secure boot, whether it's about, no writable file system, no local browser. Again, if you look at, where a lot of vulnerabilities come in, no surprise to the folks just running a regular PC environment, whether it's a browser, whether it's email, whether it's popping in a USB drive and accessing files. So, inherently just less on the device, that smaller attack surface makes it, more secure by design, as we talk about. So encrypted file system and so on. I mentioned collaboration. I'll spend a minute or two on this because I think this is very important. Pre-COVID, the collaboration was kind of, we had Skype or Link. You didn't have a ton of collaboration going on. Collaboration is key now. We're all on Zoom every day. We're all on Teams. Thank you for joining this call today, because I know you got all the webinars that you're probably on all day. So appreciate you spending some time here. But it's not going anywhere, and it's probably stayed the same from what COVID was, or maybe it's increased. So collaboration is key. The biggest innovation around this is kind of optimizing that UC experience. So kind of a quick example of this is, without UC optimization on the left, this is what you do generally. Historically, you've done this. You run, early on, we started running Team and Zooms. You're running it all, within your VM. All the communication goes through the VDI protocol. That's pretty standard for, how VDI is working. With UC optimization on the right, the big innovation here is down the bottom between device A and device B. That communication is kind of going peer-to-peer. So client's still running on the virtual desktop in the data center, but that communication is being offloaded. And that's a function of the plugins that Zoom, for example, came out with, or baking this into the workspace app from Citrix for Teams, for example. And just to kind of illustrate this performance improvement a little bit, I got a couple of quick slides here. So for example, this is a Windows VM connected to Horizon. I've got Zoom running on the VM. You can kind of see a couple things I highlight there. Utilization number one, so you can kind of see some CPU consumption, no surprise there. All the work's happening in the data center. On the right, this is the statistics from the Zoom plugin. So you can see here it's not connected, meaning it's not installed on the Thin client. So there's a package that Zoom provides right from their website, right from the Dell website. You install it on the client and it can offload the Zoom performance to it. So you can see it's not installed. You can see kind of relatively high level of memory being used on the VM through the Zoom plugin statistics, and you can see the CPU utilization as well. So if you look at the CPU, for example, at 30%, you go to an optimized session. So in this case, I've got the Zoom plugin locally on the device, and you can see my utilization has dropped 6%, lower. Again, I'm offloading that work to the client, and you can see my Zoom statistics are improved, less memory. You can see the plugins connected, meaning that it's interacting correctly with Zoom. So the newest device, again, we talked about Dell Thin OS, kind of the tenets around that, security, simplicity, so a big piece there. We'll talk about the newest client offering, which is Dell Hybrid Client. And really think of this as a term we call hybrid. The reason being, this can be a thin client, this can be running local apps. So there's really three things this can do. Is I run local apps on it, i.e. a browser, for example. So we can run local apps on this. We can just run cloud-based apps if we got a browser on the, obviously. Maybe I've got some local apps I want to access. So for example, I've got some local browsers on this. Since it is based on Linux, we can install different packages as we so choose. But by design, it's secure in the fact that it only allows Dell signed packages to be installed. So, and that's by design, just like Thin OS. You can't just install anything on it. There's signed packages from Dell that are only way to be installed on it. So in this case, out of the box, we've got Firefox and Chrome on there. Some local collaboration apps. So, maybe I'm using this for VDI. Again, it's a hybrid scenario. I want to do all my apps through VDI. I don't want to run Zoom through VDI. I want to run it locally on my client. I've got the collaboration apps running locally, so I could run my Zoom session locally on the Thin client, and then run the rest of my apps through VDI, for example. Cloud apps, again, maybe I'm just using it as a Chromebook replacement. I've got some web apps I want to use, but I also have got some local apps I need to use. I want to run collaboration locally. So there's a kind of scenario hybrid, your web apps, your local collaboration apps, and then VDI. Again, I've got my Citrix VMware workspaces, AVD. Again, pretty agnostic to the different VDI pieces we can control to. And then don't see this as often, but there's a local file explorer. Maybe you need to access local files on here. You're going to plug a USB drive and open up a presentation. So I've got some local file capabilities on this as well. Important point to note here, this is all managed by WMS Cloud or WMS On-Prem, the WISE management suite. We'll go into this a little bit further, but you might imagine we can configure all this. We can allow certain components, remove certain components, whether we uninstall them or certainly turn them off so the user can't access them. So a lot of flexibility with how we customize that. And this really goes across all the Thin client devices, a really high level of granular control on how you customize the what's available to the end user. So that's Dell Hybrid Client. So I kind of think of that in some cases. I want a non-Windows device, love Thin OS, maybe I need a browser. I step up the Dell Hybrid Client, still doing VDI, but I've got a local browser, some local apps. So that's kind of a good use case for that. Windows 10 IoT. So this is the Windows-based Thin client. As I mentioned before, this is the typical creature comforts of a Windows device, but there's a few built-in pieces here that make this a little more secure or locked down than a regular Windows PC without having to add a lot of third-party software on it. So for example, one of the things in here, built in, it's got Windows Defender, so you've got UAV on there, built into Windows, obviously. There's another piece of technology in IoT called the write filter. So essentially kind of makes the device read-only. So you use the admin, configure it, install what you want, customize the UI how you want it. Generally, you kind of have a vanilla image and you have your protocol client, you're not doing a ton on it, and then you lock the device down. So once it's deployed, something does get on the device, you say you download a file from a browser using a local browser on it, you reboot, it's gone. So nothing really persists to the flash at that point. So inherently some built-in security. If you've got third-party security software you want to run on it, for the most part, that generally will work on IoT. I always kind of tell customers, check with the vendor to what kind of support they have. But on the flip side, when you look at how IoT is utilized, maybe you're not using the browser, you're not using email on it. In my example earlier, you've got a VPN client. So it's locked down. I don't really, not running local apps on it. So security profile is a lot smaller. So it's always a debate for the security team to figure out how they want to manage that. But in a lot of cases, they'll just kind of customers take the built-in security around it and, deploy it as a kiosk. So with that said, there's a component on here called Easy Setup. And for the most part, when these are deployed, turn the device on, you've got a little UI that shows your broker client you want to connect to, and that's it. So we try to make that Windows experience as simple as possible. If you say kiosk mode, just kind of natively built into IoT with our add-on software called Easy Setup. So see a few other tenants here, but it's Windows. So this is probably the most familiar with. Trade-off is that it's Windows, right? So you get a little more management. You're probably going to keep up to date with hot fixes. You got to deploy software to it if you want to update something on the device. So a little more overhead to it, but definitely fits a lot of use cases that require a Windows endpoint for a few of the reasons I mentioned earlier. So that's your Windows 10 IoT. So Dell Thin OS, Dell Hybrid Client, Windows 10 IoT, really the thin client OSs we focus on. All that said, all those devices can be managed with our Wise Management Suite. So as you might imagine, this is our system management. The key thing to note here, this can be deployed. This is Dell Public Cloud. So you go to wisemanagementsuite.com. That's the portal. This can be managed through cloud portal. So again, remote user, on-prem users, all along the device pins up to the cloud server. We're good to go there. We can also manage it on-prem. So just simple Windows Server installer. The beauty of this, the console is web-based, whether you're on-prem or obviously cloud. Same interface, so really no difference, or very few difference between them. So the UI is very similar. Generally, you do one or the other, either run it on-prem or cloud. The beauty of the licensing with WMS Pro, you can run it in both places if you want. And kind of during COVID, some folks already had it on-prem. They said, geez, we need to get it on site or on cloud for those home users. They're able to have their licenses swap between, and you can manage two environments if you wanted to. Not common, but the license does allow you, give you the ultimate flexibility where you want to run WMS. And as I mentioned, consistent experience, whether it's on-prem or cloud. So as you might imagine, typical systems management, the management profile is a little different based on the operating system. So, back to ThinOS being the simplest to manage, really the main thing we're concerned about here is that firmware update and then the protocol client. Citrix comes out one VMware comes out with one. I want to be able to deploy that quickly to my Thin client, whether it's Dell Hybrid Client updates or Windows 10 IoT updates. That's all handled through the management suite. So automatic deployment, we talked a little bit about kind of that quick deployment or installation with ThinOS. Plug the device in, checks into the server, gets its configuration, and you're off to the races. So I can use some of that automated configuration as well with Dell Hybrid Client, or a DHC as we call it for short. So the automated deployment through the console is really a key tenet of it. Configuration management, no surprise there. Full configuration of the hardware, down to the BIOS level. So I want to configure BIOS settings on the device. It's going to give me all my hardware inventory information. So we'll have a few screenshots show a little bit more about what that looks like. But end-to-end configuration of all the devices. OS management, that's clearly a key one, is you want to update that OS, whether it's a firmware update, a full OS update, incremental update, patches, and so on. So I can, full access to do all that on the devices, again, across the OSs. At delivery, touched on that. For the most part, that's going to be your VDI client components. You've got a hybrid client or IoT. That's also those packages you need to install there. I get a run an update on the device. I've got the Zoom, that Zoom client running on hybrid client. I want to deploy that. Again, I do that right through here. So it's all about deploying, updates, packages, theoretically doing a lot less, stealing the line from Ron Popeil, set it and forget it, probably get in trouble for that. But that's the idea, right? You want to have that endpoint as simple as possible. Once it's deployed, when you need to update it, you've got the tool to do it. One thing to note here is two versions. So there's a standard version, which is a free download. This is our, kind of on-prem version. I will say, definitely smaller environments. That said, there's also a lot of features in here that, regardless of how small your environment is, are interest. So, Dell support, for example, will come with the Pro version. The Pro version is also cloud, right? So if I want to run the cloud portal, I need Pro. Standard is that simple on-prem installation. So single server running it on-prem, small amount of users. Pro gives us, all the advanced features as far as reporting, Active Directory integration, two-factor authentication. So really gives us full functionality. And the important key thing there is that that's our cloud-only offering as well. So a quick screenshots of showing the Wise Management dashboard. So, any systems management tool is going to give you kind of that main landing page. The key thing you're looking at in here is your devices. How many devices do I have? What's online? What devices are up? And then groups and configs. And that's really where I'm configuring my devices, like device configuration, which is, my VMware configuration or my, Citrix configuration, EVD for, what have you. So you can see some of the key tenants here, alerts, events, and so on. if I look at a configuration, for example, you can see I've got my broker configuration. You see some of the built-in ones there that we talked about, and pretty intuitive as far as the different parameters you want to put in there, and then gets downloaded to the client. So this is your typical broker configuration as you configure it. A lot of defaults are left alone. Really is not a ton of configuration you need on the device to get up and running. As I mentioned, it's kind of your broker, your customization, how you want the screens to look, and so on. Security settings, lockdown, date and time, those sorts of kind of native settings, system settings. And then login experience personalization, really just to make that UI of the device look and feel as simple as possible. Customers concerned about moving to thin client and want to make it look like Windows, and they actually put a Windows wallpaper on the thin client to really have that simplified look of kind of making the user think it's still a PC. So a lot of customization you can do here. The beauty of the OSs is with thin OS, for example, it's ROS, right? So we can really customize it any way we want. So a ton of flexibility there. A lot of customizations on Windows we can do, as well as hybrid clients. So pretty full featured to configure our devices variety of settings, as you might imagine. Device view, as you might imagine, it's gonna, green lights are good. It's online, it's in compliance, it's got its correct policies. A big thing about the groups and configurations is whether we get 5 devices or 30,000 devices. When the devices check in, they get the configuration from their group. So there's kind of this no creep across the environment where they all have the same configuration. Or maybe you've got different configs in different groups. The point is, when the devices check in, they really are forced to be in compliance in most cases, because they're going to get that configuration when they check in. But if they're not, they miss a package, they miss a download, they haven't been online since the package was scheduled, you're going to see a compliance notification here when they're out of compliance. And you can see hardware information. You really don't use a lot of this day in, day out. But the point is, you're going to see, all your hardware information, IP address, asset information, and so on. So this is your device view. It's going to give you, again, that really down to the device level. There's a system info tab that down the bottom there. Really will dive into your MAC address and things like that. So it really gets deep into the hardware specifics, hardware configurations. As part of Wise Management Suite, we also have we call Converter for PCs. So there's a software that comes with WMS Pro that allows you to convert or repurpose old PCs into a controlled endpoint. So once I convert that PC into a Converter for PCs device, I can fully manage it under WMS Pro. Essentially, Windows is on the device. I convert it, really lock it down with the right filter, an easy setup to really turn this into a kiosk. So that's really the kind of the point here is I want to make this Windows endpoint not only locked down and simple, but I want to really, in most cases, turn it into a kiosk just to log into my virtual desktop environment. So that's a pretty common configuration when I want to lock down the device and again, maybe extend the license of that PC before I move into a thin client down the road. So a few other screenshots here showing optimized endpoints. So for example, just showing out of the box what you might see. Again, you're not going to see this in most cases because you're going to plug the device in the configuration that this config is going to come here directly from the management server. But what the configuration options are, we call this out of box wizard. So if you just get a trial device, you want to test it out, this is what you presented with. So you can see here just the kind of default broker settings. You can see a little bit of the UI. So once I have my broker configured, I'm not really changing any of this. This is the configuration coming from my broker, but you can see here it's showing all the the different settings on that connection, regardless of what that VDI session is. So a really high level of control of that user session. Just a quick time check here. Okay. And as you might imagine, this is all, again, as I showed earlier, managed from the Wise Management Suite. So get really granular on the configuration settings. And as you might imagine, this is either managed from WMS Cloud or my on-prem server. So really get tight control of all the configuration parameters there, whether it's USB, whether it's I want to disable camera, all your BIOS settings, and so full configuration of the device there. And centralized management, we actually talked about that. So talk to systems management, talk about hardware. Kind of the last couple of slides here, once you have these deployed in your environment, folks are always asking, hey, these deployed on the back of monitors, under desks. They talked about the all-in-one. So all sorts of different options to deploy these devices in your environment. The beauty of, Dell being, a client manufacturer, obviously one of the biggest monitor manufacturers. So all sorts of configurations, deploying these out to your environment. So you want to simplify that workspace. and kind of clean up that desk environment. So, in summary, kind of wrapping up here, Cloud Client Workspace, this is, if I was to summarize the portfolio in one slide, certainly we can do, future sessions to dive deeper into each of the OSs if you'd like, or management. My contact information will be out at the end. We can certainly, reach out to folks. But, as we mentioned, the management suite, huge piece of it. I think, that in the OS is really the most important part. Talked about the different operating systems offering we have, the Thin OS, the hybrid client, Windows 10 IoT, so the different capabilities there, and figuring out is the goal to run everything through VDI? Do I want to run some apps locally? Do I need a browser? So kind of figure out what those requirements are, and kind of make sure I identify the right device for your fit. And then the Dell Thin Client solution. So we got some of those purpose-built devices that we generally go to market with customers with that again 9 times out of 10 probably fit most of the use cases. But the beauty of having that large Dell client portfolio is we can leverage a lot of other client platforms. I'd say the ones that jump out is a trader workstation where I need more than 4 monitors. There's not a ton of other hardware configurations that most folks need. And generally the thin client solutions we have fit most of those use cases, but should you need the hardware options, we have those in the Dell client portfolio certainly. So a lot of options there. A couple, next steps here. You want to learn a little bit more. I got a couple of QR codes there. Learn a little bit more about the portfolio family that I talked about. Run through kind of the hardware options. Certainly spec sheets and all that up there. We've got a nice demo center. A lot of customers are just existing Dell customers or customers looking at Dell. We got a lot of different demos, interactive demos up there. Kind of like your walkthrough videos. So, take a look at that. We've got one for ThinOS as well. So there's a few up there, and then learning, training services. So all sorts of stuff around, diving deeper into, learning and things like that. So a few resources there. And then finally, thank you very much. I appreciate, you spending the time on here. Hopefully it was a good use of your time, kind of went through it, had 45 minutes, kind of, hit the treetops of everything. There's my contact information. Any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm based in Boston as a sales engineer. We've got SEs, flooded out through the country, around the world for that matter. So, if you're looking to really, dive a little deeper and learn, kind of, get outside the marketing fluff and dig a little deeper on any of the technology we talked about, reach out to your local Dell team. If you don't have one, reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with someone. Our team loves talking about this. I'd say, a large part of our team came from Legacy Wise. So, we really enjoy thin clients in the VDI space. A lot of us have been doing this for a long time and really, get energized and talk about, VDI, whether it's on-prem or cloud and so on. So a lot of innovation in that space. So love connect with you and happy to, reach out to you. Jack, we can go through some of the Q&A. I didn't really look at it while we're going along. You want me to run through it or do you want to read off?
Yeah, I'll pose them up to you and then you can answer
Sure.
and we'll move to the next one. But you're
Sure.
getting a lot of praise in the chat right now. Everyone
Oh,
really
great.
appreciates this. So
Awesome.
thank you very, very
Of
much.
course.
This was fantastic.
Awesome.
So the very first question that came in was, can Dell Hybrid Client run on laptops I currently have?
Yeah, so technically, the answer is yes. It's not something we currently support if it's not on laptops. I don't know what kind of vendor you have. So right now, PC Converter is a solution for kind of converting existing laptops. That said, it's Linux. It'll run on it. We continue to kind of look at different options to bring to the market to, repurposing other machines and things like that. So, the short answer is yeah, technically you can do it. It's not something that's fully supported today, but it's something we certainly keep looking at to try to, again, innovate our portfolio and for things, use cases like that, as you mentioned. So Dell Hybrid Client on other hardware.
Awesome. And then the next question that came in was, what's a use case for a thin client with 32 or 64 gigs of RAM?
Yeah, you're generally not going to see that much RAM. So probably the 3264 you saw was flash, so storage. RAM for the most part, 8 gigs is probably max the most you need in a lot of cases. Even if you're running, say the Precision compact system with Dell Hybrid Client and 6-7 monitors, maybe you go up to 16 gigs of RAM for the monitor configurations. But the 32 and 64 is probably you saw the flash configuration, which is storage. So the SSD or storage. So generally max, you're going to have 8 gigs as our standard RAM configuration. So might have just been a, seeing that in there. So no use case for it is the answer. Never need, generally, and again, never need that much, hopefully.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Then the next question was, are there any issues with using headsets or cameras on ThinOS devices with VMware Horizon desktops?
Yeah, so I'd say, in general, that's always been a Achilles heel, right? Headsets, audios, cameras, and really there were two things. One was, the hardware always kind of supported from a hardware level. You could plug in a headset, you've got a webcam, you've got a built-in webcam in the laptops. So historically, a lot of those, right, were big Achilles heels. Unified communications in general, that stuff just didn't work. So whether it's Horizon or Citrix, the good news, all the innovation, all the really improvements, all the heavy lifting done there to support them nowadays. And as you imagine, this is very common nowadays because people are doing, VDI from home with collaboration, headsets and cameras. The big innovation there was the improvements in the protocol. So really it was the improvements in PC over IP, the improvements in Horizon Blast. So specifically Horizon, right? So Blast did a ton of work and continues to do a lot of work around improving audio video experience. So it's really a function of the protocol, moreover. But as you saw, my all-in-one's got a camera, laptop's got cameras. So headsets, those are certainly supported. I will say, we can't test everything. I will say in our release notes, we kind of list tested peripherals. So we'll list some headsets, some cameras in there. But the short answer is, yeah, there could be issues with, different vendors. And certainly sometimes the configuration isn't, super clear as far as, getting it up and running, depending on, versions of Horizon you have or headsets you might have. But for the most part, I'd say, it's been improved drastically over the years. And so, I didn't expect a ton of issues there, but like anything, it's a peripheral. So you can run into quirky issues, but certainly it's something that's, improved drastically in the past.
Glad to hear that's been a focus, right? So to
Yeah,
make sure that we can keep improving.
absolutely.
Kind of on that note, right? Are there any collaboration plugins like Zoom and already enabled with Thin Client OS? I'm pretty sure you
Yep.
covered that a little bit, but
Yep. What I was showing you earlier, the Zoom optimization, that was on ThinOS if I wasn't clear. So yep, the Zoom plugin is embedded in ThinOS. So it's a package, so it's not embedded in the OS. Everything's modular, so it's essentially a Zoom package. So Zoom provides packages for all the OSs. So it's download the plugin, install it on the OS, and yeah, absolutely, that's on ThinOS.
awesome. Then the next question that came in from Max was, are there any Dell Technologies proven professional securities on Wise / Thin Client offerings?
Mac,
Kind of in the same way like PowerEdge.
yeah, Max, that's a great question. So, the closest thing we have now is that, the Dell Learning, if you go to Dell Learning and you'll see the WISE, not necessarily certifications, but trainings. There's not currently a certification. I think part of it's, it's not overly complex. I think they really haven't come up with a certification program. It's a good call out. It's certainly something I'll inquire on because it certainly makes a lot of sense. But the good news, there is some training. I've never had that in the past. So the good news, we actually have kind of formal online training. Look for Dell Learning. But I don't believe it kind of official certification yet. But certainly it's something I know the team looks at because it does get asked. So great question, Max. I'm glad you asked that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Max. You're going to make the team possibly create one. It's definitely in the forefront of everyone's minds.
Yeah,
The next one was, can you remote control a client, for example, VNC, from a WMS device?
absolutely. Yep. So good question. I didn't mention that, but yeah, all the devices you can shadow with VNC. If you got Windows IoT, you can even use whatever other remote solution you want. But absolutely, you can do VNC into ThinOS, VNC to hybrid client. Good news there is we continue to innovate on remote control of clients. So come another month, you might see some more innovation around remote control. But today, absolutely, we can do VNC into ThinOS and all the platforms. So yes, from
Oh,
WMS. Yep.
awesome. And then this next one is kind of a two-part question. So we've got someone where a customer is considering zero client, but wants to know the difference between thin client and zero client.
Yeah, depends who you ask, I guess. I mean, the short answer, and I breezed that one-on-one slide. So thin client's a term we've heard about, right, for 30 years, right? There's generally a small OS on there, a little bit of firmware, as I talked about, our firmware options. Zero client's been tossed around for a couple of years. VMware and Teradici, who makes the PC over IP product or software, really kind of got that back on the radar. And their concept of zero client was it really was just firmware or just a chip in the device and not a quote unquote a software OS on the device. So really locked down to just do one specific protocol. So that's the latest when you see zero client. A lot of times they're talking a Teradici zero client that just does PC over IP, just a VMware Horizon. So some people use the term zero client with a Linux thin client. Sometimes even Dell Thin OS, some people might refer to it as zero client. But for the most part, a thin client is going to have some sort of OS, whether it's Windows, Linux, Dell Thin OS. That's generally be kind of considered a thin client. Zero client, again, maybe that purpose-built device for Teradici and Horizon. And then again, some vendors might use the word Linux as zero client. So unfortunately, that term has been confusing. Hope that kind of clarifies a little bit, but yeah, it's one of those marketing terms, and really that's kind of where it got back on the map was so yeah, to confuse us all. But hopefully that helps answer a little bit of what the difference between the two are, and hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that helps. It made sense to me, and I'm not as knowledgeable as you are and everyone else on this webinar, so made sense to me. So hopefully that helps.
Awesome.
And then there were just some other questions in the chat
Sure.
relating to, can we share this presentation in a PDF format, so, right? So we can
Absolutely.
post it up on the Dtux site. And if there was any other links that you would like me to share, I will send out a
Sure.
post-event email to everybody.
Absolutely.
So everybody stay tuned. That survey will be in there. Also, when you close out this webinar, a link to the survey will pop up, but the survey will come in there, and we'll share all the links, all the resources. Chris is a great resource, so don't be afraid to reach out to him. His email is still up there. So he put it out into the world. So Chris, you might have
Yeah.
a lot of emails in your inbox.
Yeah, it's great. And hey, I just took a quick look at the chat. Thank you very much, folks out there. I really appreciate it. And a special shout out to my old buddy Ricardo. I love seeing him on. I'm not sure if he's still on, but I'm going to drop him a note. So love seeing old friends on here. So awesome. Love the chat. Love the questions. And again, you got my contact info. Don't be shy to reach out. So thank you so much, Jack, for having me. Love being a part of the user community. Love to come back and dive deeper on any of the different technologies we talked about. So love it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back, Chris. But we
Cool.
did get one more question in at
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
last minute, if you don't
Yep.
mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I got time.
Can ThinOS run simultaneous sessions of Horizon and Citrix?
Yeah, good question. So we can connect to both brokers simultaneous. I'd have to check that. I want to say I've done this with AVD and VMware just because the customer had asked. But honestly, drop me a note. I'm happy to test that for you. I know we have kind of a new feature we did where multi-broker. So, coming to a log on screen, I can select Citrix, I can select Horizon, select AVD, switch between them. I think I did do some testing between two brokers simultaneously. I can't promise that, but I'd have to look into that. But honestly, feel free to drop me a note and I can look at that for you because it has come up before.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it, unless any other people have more questions. But Chris, right, we're definitely going to have you
Awesome.
back. We've already talked about some topics for 2024, so everybody stay tuned.
Awesome.
Yeah, and thank you for spending a little bit of your day with us. I know it's a
Yeah.
lot of people's lunch hours. Like Chris, you
Yeah.
just did
Thank you.
this
Yeah.
over your lunch, so
No
thank
worries.
you.
Awesome. Well, thanks a
Awesome.
lot, Jack. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you. Have a good one, everybody, and
Take
stay
care,
tuned to
folks.
your emails for the end of year appreciation event and all of the resources presented today. And then give us till about Tuesday next week, and we will have this recording up on the website so you can come back to it and refresh yourself on everything we talked about today.
Great.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.